Hi everybody and welcome back to the Coderoom. Okay, so now up until now, we've been doing a lot of HTML programming, right? We've been doing headers, lists, links, and throwing all these things into an HTML document, right? Now, the thing about the HTML document and the HTML code that you've been programming is that's all about what we call the structure of the document, okay? And so that's all the content that you want to put into the document, what order you want it to appear, and a little bit, how it's structured into paragraphs and headers and all this stuff. That's all about the structure of the document. Now, when you load up your website, okay, and this is the website that we've been working on, you probably notice that, again, it doesn't look very modern or, it doesn't necessarily look very, stylish. I mean, we're using fonts that look kind of old. The website looks a little bit dated. And you're probably starting to ask yourself, well, how do I make this look maybe a little bit more modern or add my own kind of flavor to what I'm seeing on screen here? So, how do I change the colors of, the headers, or how do I change the colors of the paragraph text? How do I change the font size or even the font that's being used or the size of the images, So all these questions about, how do you make the website look better, okay? Or how do you change the look of the website? And that's when we talk all about styling, okay? So HTML is all about structure. Now we're going to talk all about styling. So to do styling in web programming, we actually use an entirely separate language from HTML, okay? So HTML is all about programming a structure, and you've learned that programming language. And now going forward, we're going to learn actually a second language that has to do all with styling, okay? And that second language is called CSS, or Cascading Stylesheets, okay? Now in future episodes, we'll probably discuss why exactly it's called Cascading Stylesheets, but this is just a brief introduction about what CSS code looks like and kind of sets you up for the next couple of episodes, okay? So just to be clear, you've learned HTML, and now we're gonna learn a completely separate language called CSS, okay? So the very first thing I'm gonna do for you guys is show you what CSS code generally looks like, okay? So CSS code basically looks like this. It has a property, okay? It has a property, colon, and then the value of that property, okay? And CSS is just a listing of all these properties and their various values, okay? So to separate one property from another property, you separate it with a semicolon, okay? So property, colon, value, semicolon, and then another property and its value, semicolon, and another property and its value, okay? So that's what CSS code generally looks like. Now this is just the format of it. Let's take a look at some actual CSS properties, okay? So here's a couple of real CSS properties. So you can set the color of an HTML element or tag by saying color, colon, and then the name of the color. So blue, red, green, yellow, all these kind of things, okay? Now let's say you want to change the font. Okay, so to change the font on another line, or sorry, I shouldn't say on another line, but just separated by semicolon, okay, you put font family, colon, Arial. Okay, so you can use the Arial font. Another semicolon to separate that, and then you have font size, colon, 30 points, so you can use 30-point font, okay? So this is what CSS code looks like. Now you may be asking the question, well, how do I know what the names of the properties are, and how do I know what values they can accept, right? Like, can I do color and say teal, or canary yellow? Can I say anything? Well, this is what learning CSS is all about. Just like how learning HTML, you had to learn, table and links, and then even within a table, you had to learn that there's a TR for row and a TD for table cell. For links, you had to learn href as an attribute, right? Same thing with CSS. Learning CSS is all about learning the names of all these different properties and learning their possible values. So as you go through this and as you get more practice and more experience, you will learn all these properties and their values, okay? So that's what CSS looks like. Now the question is, where do we put this code and how do we incorporate it into our HTML? Well, it turns out there's a number of ways you can do this, and we're gonna show you 3 ways to do that in these videos, okay? And we're gonna show you 3 ways that are each increasingly common, okay? So the first 2 we're going to show you are actually not a very common way to do CSS, but it's a good way to learn CSS. And then the third way we'll show you is actually the more common way that people do CSS today, okay? So the 3 ways we're going to teach you, the first one's called INLINE CSS, and then we're going to teach you about the style tag. So just like there's a table tag and a link tag, or an anchor tag and a list tag, there's also a style tag. And then the third way, again, the most common way, will teach you how to put that CSS in a completely separate file and reference it outside of the actual HTML document, okay? So we're going to teach you those in the upcoming videos. Now, before we get rolling on the upcoming videos, there's two things I want to mention. Okay, the first one is default styles. Okay, your guys' browsers like Chrome, Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer, Safari, all these browsers come preloaded with default styles. Okay, and what does that mean? Well, if you think about it, we programmed a website. Okay, so we have a website here that we've programmed, and we didn't specify any style at this point. We didn't say what font, we didn't say what colors, and the browser spits them out this way. For example, H1 looks like it uses a Times New Roman font. It looks like it's bold, and it looks like it's big. The font is big, right? Look at the paragraph text. It's a little bit smaller. It's not bold. If you look at links, links are blue and underlined, okay? So these are all the default styles of the browser, okay? So certain HTML tags and elements come with all of these default styles in the browser. Okay, so when a browser loads a link, it's going to apply all those styles automatically to it. Okay, so what CSS programming is all about is overriding some of those default styles. So you may want your links to appear green, so you're going to override the link color to be green rather than blue. All right, so you're overriding the styles that you want, and the ones that you don't override, those are kept there. Okay. So that's what default styles are all about. Now, one thing to know about default styles, and this is a very important principle when you program HTML and CSS, okay? As a good practice, you should never use the default styles of the browser as a way to make something look the way you want it, okay? Let me give you an example. You've programmed a nice website here with a header and a paragraph, okay? Now, let's say you want your paragraph text to look big and bold like the header, okay? That doesn't mean you change the paragraph tags to H1 tags, okay? Because then you're changing the structure. You're telling people that this is a header when really it's a paragraph, okay? Just to make it look a certain way. So you shouldn't switch your HTML tags to make something look a certain way. Rather, you should use styles and CSS code to change that, okay? So that's a good rule of thumb. Don't use HTML tags to get a look that you want. Okay? Use HTML tags to define the structure of your document, then use CSS to fine-tune it to look the way you want it. All right, that's it for this episode. We'll see you guys in the next one.